How to Create a Glitch Monologues Season 24 Chapter 7. This is Season 24 of How to Create a Glitch in the Matrix Monologues Episode 7. In this episode, we will be talking about how one would go about setting up a state such as described by this podcast. To do this, we will be summarizing the basic principles of each aspect of the system, and providing some context for how it might be used. This first episode will document the operation of the social economy. To start out, a society built on the principles of this podcast would recognize fundamentally that 1. Social dynamics would be governed by the social economy. 2. Attention would be regulated. 3. Social relationships would be governed by archetypal principles. 4. The state would impose order through the denial of privileges rather than the restriction of freedoms. 5. The state's power would be imposed through a social credit system built to manage day-to-day decisions, with appeals to social courts. 6. Social realities would be fundamentally consensual. Now, the basis for order in such a system would require careful monitoring of the facial expressions, body language of social participants to look for mirroring, attention and postural releases. The need for technology to monitor these things would be mitigated by the ubiquity of cameras and cell phones, feeding data into a central monitoring system. This system would do the following. 1. Monitor mirroring to assess rapport, gateway formation, common emotionality. 2. Monitor postural releases to monitor signs of deference, that is the linking of one's actions to the unconscious impulses of another. 3. Attention, to ascertain exchanges of attention for confidence. This system would provide real-time data which could be examined in concert with vocal data to assess conjoined contract formation and divisive expectation contracts. All of this information together would provide a basis for decisions of the social courts, to determine what social contracts should be enforced, and what contracts should be voided. Likewise, social data would provide a framework for the social credit system, in that, contracts which are divisive, or correspond to breaking of conjoined contracts, would be punished through loss of social credit. And, expectation matching, through conjoined contracts, would result in gain of social credit. Now, progressive deterioration of a social credit profile would ultimately be redressed through loss of privileges. Access to non-basic services, luxuries, travel or mobility, etc. Appeals would be to social courts, which would deal with the nitty-gritty of any arguments as to why loss of credit should be reversed, pursuant to whichever contracts resulted in the loss. The rating that a person ultimately is assigned would not be user-defined, but rather the result of a monitoring of their willingness to meet expectations and create conjoined expectation contracts. A tendency to form divisive expectation contracts would be penalized. Both confidence and attention would be commoditized, by determining the value of attention to advertisers. This would allow social participants to determine the value of each interaction, and provide a corresponding value for confidence exchanges through conjoined contracts, and confidence theft, through divisive expectation contracts. This would enable social courts to determine the value and amount of each remedy, the cost of ultimately every breach of contract. That's the end of the podcast for today. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe.